Hello, successful people. Welcome back to the Iron Fry Success channel. I'm DK.
And I'm Mo.
Thank you so much to our subscribers.
And if you're new to our channel, welcome. In today's video, DK is going to discuss canceling a new home construction contract.
Like, can you cancel? And if you do, will you get your money back?
Let's get into the video.
So you signed a contract for a new construction home, and then you have a change of circumstances where you need to cancel or terminate that contract. Now you have questions. So I'm going to go over first, what are some of the reasons, most common reasons, why people may need to cancel a new construction home contract? What are some of the reasons why the builder may cancel the new construction home contract? Will you or will you not get your deposits back? Could you owe the builder any money? I'm going to go over what are the most common provisions in a new construction home contract to look for so that you will know whether or not you can or cannot cancel and when. And finally, I'll have some recommendations about what to do. The most common reason why people may cancel a new construction home contract are because of a change of financial circumstances, which could come up in a few ways. The first is a loss of income. This is the most obvious, where you may lose a job or may lose a source of income that you are relying upon to be able to qualify for a mortgage or to be able to afford the house. A health emergency. There are times where the buyer or a buyer's family member may experience a health emergency that really needs your full attention or money right now, so you may not have the time or the money to follow through with a new home construction contract. Financing is denied. This could happen where at the initial stage you were pre-approved or pre-qualified for a loan, but then something happened, a change of financial circumstances, or in some cases, people make big ticket purchases like cars or other things and don't realize that by the time you go to closing and you are reevaluated for a loan, those things may interfere with you being approved, and therefore your funding or lending may be denied at the end, which prevents you from following through with closing on your new construction home. Sticker shock. This one really has a few examples of what I mean by after you sign your contract on your new construction home, you learn information that gives you sticker shock, where you may not want to follow through with closing on the sale. The first thing is that the stage at which most people contract for a new construction home is up front, before you've actually picked those things in the design center that are your upgrades that you want in your house. Typically, those things can add a substantial amount of money to the final price of your house. It has happened that after people have picked those things, they learn that the bill that would be added on to the total purchase price of the house is way more money than what they intended to spend. Sometimes that happens because people don't understand fully what things are standard and what things are not. So that when you look at the model home and you see 8-foot doors and all these wonderful things, you may not be aware that that's actually an upgrade feature if you were to build that same home. And now, upon realizing how much it really costs, you're just like, no, I don't want to do that. Another issue that could cause sticker shock is where the initial pre-qualification or pre-approval stage, the interest rates are in one place and you don't have a rate lock that preserves it. And during the time of the building of the house, the interest rates go up such that now what once was an affordable mortgage amount turns out to be a mortgage amount that you can't afford, and therefore you may want to cancel the contract before closing. Sometimes it happens that the homeowner doesn't realize the true amount of the mortgage. What I mean by that is at the beginning, there's usually an estimate for how much the mortgage is going to be. That estimate does not always include things like homeowners insurance and taxes. Occasionally, the amount of taxes represented at the beginning when the appraisal is done represents an amount of taxes that is done before the house actually gets built and is on the property. After the house is built, the amount of the appraisal will go up clearly because now there's a house on it, and before there was just like an idea of a house. And the actual taxes you may owe that's added on top of your mortgage could be totally different than the much lower estimate when there wasn't a house. And now looking at the true amount of the mortgage that includes the HOA fees and the true amount of taxes and homeowners insurance could exceed the amount of money that you can afford for this house. And now as the buyer, you may want to get out of this contract before you actually close on it. Another issue which could have a financial change of circumstances is where the appraised value comes out lower in the end than what you originally anticipated. The way that might come up is, let's say at the beginning, the amount appraised was estimated to be $600,000. But then when the house is built, maybe there's a market change or something happens, and now the property is valued at $550,000. So now you have a contract for $600,000, the value is $550,000. And so if your lender is going to lend you a certain percentage of the $550,000, let's assume you are a fortunate person that has a 100% financing. Still, you owe $50,000, which would be the difference between the $550,000 and the $600,000 you contracted for, because the builder isn't going to just lower the amount of the house just for you. Would be nice, but it doesn't happen. So you now have to come out of your pocket $50,000 to make up the shortfall in the contract, but you don't have it, and so you may need to cancel that contract. So moving on from a change in financial circumstance, there could be a change in geographic location. Let's say that the buyer has contracted to build this home because it is the place of your future employment. You have a letter, you're building this house, you know when you're going to move, and then that employer either goes out of business or rescinds that job offer, so you no longer need to relocate. Or it could be the opposite situation where you are planning on living in one place and then your job sends you to live somewhere else so that you can no longer follow through on the building of the house. Another issue that could impact you and where you geographically are located is if there is a family emergency. Let's say a parent or a loved one who lives in a different state is ill and needs you to come and help with caretaking responsibilities so that now you can no longer follow through on building this new home and you need to get out of the contract. Builder performance issues can be a reason why a buyer may want to cancel a contract for new home construction. There may be milestones in your contract that the builder has to meet, and maybe the builder has to meet them by a particular time or phase of the build, and you're observing they're not getting done. Also, there could be delays. Usually in the contract, it'll state what delay is the builder's responsibility and what delays might be the buyer's responsibility and what things are not the builder's responsibility, like a weather event. But it may say that there are certain delays that the builder would have to have a good reason for having that delay. And if it's a significant delay, you may come to the point where you say, now I am not getting contractually what I contracted for on the timeline I contracted for, so I want to get out of this contract and terminate it. Substandard workmanship. There are times where in the contract it'll say what specific kinds of materials that the builder has to use to build the house. If you have a contract that specifies that kind of thing and you see the builder is not doing it or has not done it, that might be a reason why you may want to terminate the new home construction contract as well. Failed inspections or failure to meet building codes is a reason why a buyer might want to terminate a contract. There may be certain things up to code that builder has to do, and there are typically inspections that happen periodically throughout the time of the build. If the case is the inspection reveals that there is some code violation or deficiency, that might be a reason why you may want to terminate the new home construction contract as well. And although this may not happen often, it does happen sometimes where the builder is building the wrong plan. So it could happen where you pick out one plan when you first contract for your new home and the builder builds a totally wrong house plan where that is not what you asked for at all. Or perhaps you made an adjustment or structural change in the floor plan that is not actually reflected structurally in what the builder has built. And in that case, you may want to terminate the new construction contract. Now, those were some reasons why you may want to terminate a new home construction contract. Let's talk about some reasons why the builder may want to terminate the new home construction contract. One of those reasons could be if you fail to close on the house on time. The contract may have with specificity how much time you have or a certain date by which you need to close. If you fail to secure financing or otherwise are unavailable and do not close on time, it is possible that under your contract, the builder may terminate the contract on you. Failure to adequately secure financing in a certain amount of time could also be a reason for the builder to terminate the contract. I mentioned earlier that there could be situations where interest rates go up, or there may be situations where between contracting and the time the home is built, you've gone out and bought a boat or a new car or something, which changes the dynamics in your approval for financing. If your financing falls through, the builder may be able to terminate the contract. Now, I don't know how much this happens in other people's home building, but when we built our home, there was a series of documents that the builder would send and certain things we needed to approve or sign. And generally speaking, what I'm talking about is when you're building a semi-custom or custom home, there may be things you are responsible for approving or signing, and a failure for you to approve those things or sign them on time could be a reason for you to be in default of the contract and the builder terminate the contract. Another reason I've seen for the builder to terminate a contract is when the home increased in value between the time you contracted for it and the time the home is done. This I've seen happen to some people who are buying semi-custom homes where you contract for $600,000 and by the time the home is built, the market has gone up and the house is now worth $700,000. So now the builder comes back and says, well, I can actually sell this home to somebody else for more money. So either you give me the extra money for this home or I'm terminating the contract. And that has been something in the news where if you Google it or if you have seen that before, where people's houses have been like taken away from them at the last minute because the builder canceled the contract because they knew they could get more money selling that home to someone else now. So let's get to the thing that most people want to know. If I cancel the contract, will I get my earnest money deposit or even maybe my design center deposit back if you've actually gotten that far in the process? The answer, as I'm sure you've anticipated, is maybe, maybe not. It depends. What does it depend on? It depends on how long between the time you sign the contract and the time that you want to cancel, how much time has passed and what's happened. Did the builder break ground yet? Have they built the foundation? Did they build the whole house? Are you talking about canceling right a few days after you signed? Or are you talking about canceling a few days before you're supposed to go to closing? Most of the time in the contract, it will say whether or not you have time from the day that you sign the contract, a period of days where you can cancel with no penalty. Then there'll be something in there that says how much time would elapse from that, where if you don't come back and say, I want to terminate the contract, they can keep your earnest money deposit. And there also may be provisions in the contract that say, if you wait past a certain time, Not only can they keep your earnest money deposit, but maybe there may be some penalties, fees, or other money that you may owe the builder for terminating. So the answer to can you get your earnest money deposit back is maybe and sometimes, but it all depends on what period of time you waited from the time you signed the contract to cancel the contract, and what does your contract say about the issue of you getting your money back at all. This is why it's a good idea to work with a realtor who can walk you through these things. I'm not a realtor, but I would highly suggest that you work with one, because knowing what those deadlines are and what the reasons are in the contract about what kind of reasons for terminating are acceptable and which are not, that's something you would want to know up front if you can. The answer to the question of whether or not you will get your earnest money deposit back if the builder terminates the contract also depends. It depends on what's the reason why the builder cancels the contract, when is the builder canceling the contract, and what does it say in your contract about builder termination. For example, there are sometimes clauses in new home construction contracts that says not only is the buyer not entitled to specific performance, meaning you may not be entitled to specifically everything that it says in the contract for the builder to do. There may also be a clause that says the builder has the right to cancel the contract with you for any reason whatsoever. And sometimes it'll say whether or not the builder is entitled to keep your deposit, or if the builder exercises the option to cancel for whatever reason, are you entitled to your deposit back? Also worth noting is there may be a provision in the contract that allows the builder to keep your deposit money if the reason why the builder is terminating is due to your failure to abide by one of the provisions in the contract. So look out for that. Now let's get to what are some of the things that you can look for in a contract that will tell you whether you can terminate a contract and what would happen, and whether the builder can terminate the contract and what would happen. I've made a list of 12 of the most common things from new home construction contracts. Number 1, does the contract include an option period? This is what I was talking about earlier when I said that there may be a few days between the day you initially signed the contract for the new construction home, where you might have 3 days or a week to be able to change your mind, no penalty, and be able to get any money or deposits back. That's called an option period, and look for that in the contract. Number 2, does the contract for new construction include any financing contingencies? This would be a statement that says that if you are not able to secure financing by a certain date, that you're able to withdraw from the contract. And does that financing contingency also state whether you would withdraw with penalty or without penalty? Meaning, would they keep your deposit, the whole thing, a percentage of it, or would you just have to pay a fee? Look for if there are any financing contingencies in the contract. Number 3, does the contract include construction milestones and consequences for delays? Sometimes the contract will tell you what time-wise are the milestones the builder should meet in completion of the house. Not always, but sometimes. Sometimes the contract will also say something about delays. Delays that the builder is responsible for, or delays that the builder is not responsible for, or delays that you would be held responsible for. For example, in our contract, there was a provision that talked about a delay that the builder would not be responsible for. Things like weather, COVID pandemic, supply chain, things that are beyond the builder's control. Then it also talked about things that I would be responsible for a delay if I did not sign and turn in paperwork and approve things on time. Then it talked about what happens if the builder has a delay. that is a significant delay for which the builder doesn't have a really good reason for that delay. So look for provisions that discuss delays and whether or not those provisions state what your recourse is, meaning can you cancel a contract for a particular kind of delay. And if you do, always look for, does that mean you get your money back, all of it, some of it, none of it, or would you have to pay a fee? Does the contract include consequences of failure to close on time? Is there a particular date by which you have to close? Is there a grace period for what happens if you can't close? Something happens with your financing and you can't close by that date. Is there a particular grace period or period of time that you have? Are you going to be charged a fee, or is there something else that happens if you miss that closing date? So look for that provision of consequences of failure to close on time in your contract. Number 5, does the contract include any provisions for when you can terminate the contract due to loss of income, a health emergency, a family emergency, if your job does move you out of the area? Specifically look to see if any of these things are in the contract as being a valid reason to be able to terminate or cancel, and if there are any time constraints on, if it's gotten so far down the road or near completion, do you get all, some, none of your money back, or are you going to be assessed a fee but allowed to get out of the contract? Number 6, look for any and all statements in the contract that mention earnest money deposits, that mention design center deposits, because they may not be in one paragraph. It could be something that's stated in a paragraph or provision of the contract on a different topic. Specifically look for things that refer to the builder retaining an earnest money deposit, the builder retaining a design center deposit, or you owing any more money when it comes to your deposits. Look for these things hidden in different provisions and paragraphs. That will give you an idea of the totality of all the things that could happen where the builder would be entitled to keep your deposit money, or you'd be able to get it back. Number 7, look for any provisions in the contract, either standalone or hidden in other provisions, that discuss circumstances under which you would owe the builder any more money. Are there circumstances where the builder could demand money from you and make you pay extra money? For example, at the end when the value of the home goes up and the builder now wants to charge you more money on top of the contract? Are there certain things that if you don't do them by a certain date, now the builder gets to fine you or charge you a fee? Look for those things hidden in the contract. Does the contract specify any regulatory or building code requirements or zoning laws that the builder has to abide by? Does the contract say there are certain permits the builder is supposed to obtain? If so, make sure you know that the builder actually got those permits. Are there certain things that are supposed to be done up to a certain building code or standard? Did the builder pass the inspection? Do you know whether those things were upheld or not? And what does your contract say about the builder's failure to abide by those zoning laws or regulations when it comes to quality standards and building codes? Can you terminate for that reason? And if you do, are there any indications of whether you would be able to do that penalty-free and get your money back in the event that happened? Number 10, look for provisions that say what happens in the event that you have a legal dispute with the builder. Does it state whether or not you would be able to sue that builder in court? Does it say that you would need to take them to arbitration? And are there any other language or provisions in this contract that talk about what you can or cannot sue the builder or take the builder to arbitration for? Number 11, does the contract make any statements about certain topics that you can or cannot complain about? What I mean by that is sometimes there is a non-disparagement clause in the contract. That just says that you cannot make disparaging comments about the builder like here on YouTube or other social media, or perhaps post something negative on Google, it may not preclude you from being able to make a complaint with like your housing authorities, or to be able to make a complaint in the Better Business Bureau or file a lawsuit. But the contract may say something about you posting or spreading negative commentary to potential clients, and you may be assessed some kind of fine or fee if you violate that. And number 12, does the contract have a convenience clause? That's the name of the clause I was talking about earlier that would allow the builder to terminate the contract with you at any time or for convenience. It'll say that the builder is allowed to terminate for the convenience of the builder. So look to see if that clause is there. And if so, does it say anything else about in the event the builder exercises that? Do they return your earnest money? Do they return your design center deposit? What happens to you financially in the event that that happens? Finally, we get to what should you do if you're considering terminating your new home construction contract? You're in a contract now. You've had one of the change of circumstances I talked about earlier, and you want to know where to start. There are two schools of thought on that. One school of thought is for you to try and negotiate with the builder and talk to the builder. Because there are factors going on in the market, and depending on at what stage of the build you bring up the possible termination, there are certain circumstances that may lean in your favor where the builder may actually be amenable to allowing you to terminate the contract. Primarily, if it is early in the process, you haven't broken any ground yet, the builder hasn't started building anything, there's a fair amount of interest and competition for homes to be built in that neighborhood, so business is looking good, where the builder may not be concerned about not being able to get someone coming behind you that wants that lot to build the house. Maybe they have a waiting list. Under those circumstances, the builder may be amenable to allowing you to cancel the contract, even if you are past any option period where you would have been able to cancel, no problem anyway. So it's possible that you may be able to negotiate with the builder canceling the contract. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get all of any deposits you've given back, but in terms of you not being held responsible for continuing with the contract, you may be able to get out of it, and you might be able to negotiate return of some or all of your money. It's just that those two things may not go together all the time. The other issue is maybe the house is near the end completion. There are circumstances where if you come along toward the end and maybe you were the individual that had the contract where the value of the home went up and it went up substantially, and maybe there's market demand, so the builder may not care that much about getting out of the $600,000 contract with you when they have buyers that will now pay $700,000 and the market commands $700,000 price for the same house. So maybe the builder would not mind terminating that contract with you. Again, your ability to get out of fulfilling the obligation of the contract is a different issue than whether or not you would be able to get some, all, none of your money back, or maybe be assessed a penalty for being able to get out of the contract. The other avenue of pursuit is consulting an attorney. Now, this is something that a lot of people may not want to do because it is expensive, and the thought process is, I don't want to be stuck paying an attorney a lot of money for some long drawn out process where in the end I wind up in the same situation, which is I'm not getting any of my money back. But one of the upsides is you may not have to actually go into some kind of litigation or arbitration proceeding with the attorney, but maybe the weight of having an attorney approach the builder as your representative to negotiate getting you out of it or some of your money back might be worth it, depending on how much money you stand to gain or lose. If I was working with a realtor, I would definitely consult the realtor and see if the realtor has referrals to attorneys who do that kind of work. But at the end of the day, your objective is to get out of that contract so that you are not forced to follow through with buying a house where your circumstance has changed. And your objective too is to get out of it with getting some of your money back, but at the end, even if you didn't get your money back, not owing the builder a penalty or any additional money for canceling may also be a win for you depending on your situation. Thank you for joining us. I hope this gave you some good information if you're considering canceling your new home construction contract.
Please subscribe for more content about new home construction and model home tours in and around San Antonio.
And subscribe to continue to follow us as we continue to turn our new construction house into a home.
And as always, until next time, be peaceful, stay prayerful, and count your blessings.